Cover-ups, intimidations, and obstructions. These are the themes that define today's Democratic Party. We start with the new revelations on the cover-up of Biden's decline. This week, former Biden senior aide Mike Donnellan claimed ignorance of the mere existence of the auto pen. And yet, we discovered the Biden team offered Donnellan, get this, $8 million incentive if Biden won re-election, which raises some questions. How could someone this important in Biden's orbit be unaware of the auto pen? And did this financial incentive encourage him to cover up Biden's declining mental state? It's Rhetorical Question Sunday, everyone. But just as disturbing is what we're learning the Biden team is doing outside of congressional committees, according to journalist Mark Halperin. They're intimidating Kamala Harris to keep her mouth shut about what she witnessed. Listen.
If the Biden people decide that Kamala Harris is coming after Joe Biden, wait till you hear the Palin-esque stories about how much they tried to help her be prepared to be vice president and be in a position to run, and how much they decided not happening. She's not up to this.
Now, the House still has a ways to go in their investigation. 6 more Biden aides are scheduled to testify through September, or at least plead the fifth. Former Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Bruce Reed will be brought in for questioning on Tuesday. Now, joining us live for the big close-up is Congresswoman Paulina Luna, member of the House Oversight Committee. Congresswoman, are we only scratching the surface on these cover-ups? And what do you think they're hiding ultimately?
Most certainly, I'd have to say that they're absolutely hiding the fact that Biden did suffer from cognitive decline. And if I could just share with everyone, I actually remember having a conversation with a very prominent Democrat on the House floor when I was pushing for that inherent contempt vote on Garland for hiding the Her tapes. And what I can tell you is that Democrat stated, you know just as well as I know the state and the condition in which he's in. We don't have to push the topic or make it any more of a bigger controversy than it is. So the fact is that they all knew about it. And I do believe that we're not going to get much on the oversight investigations because I think that every single one of them is going to plead the fifth.
Molly?
Congresswoman, thanks for joining us on this Sunday evening. There is another potential scandal coming to light. DNI Tulsi Gabbard released testimony of a whistleblower in the intel community who describes being pressured to agree with Obama's 2017 assessment and ignore violations to tradecraft standards. A supervisor is claimed to have told the whistleblower, quote, "Isn't it possible Putin has something on Trump to blackmail him and coerce him?" And when the whistleblower pushed back, that supervisor allegedly said, quote, "I need you to say you agree with these judgments so that the Defense Intelligence Agency will go along with them." Now, Congresswoman, is the House Oversight Committee looking into these allegations? And does this suggest that the Obama intel community intimidated officials to skirt their own rules in order to create a false narrative about Trump and Russia?
Oh, it doesn't just suggest it. I would say that it's proof, and it's not the first time that we've seen firsthand the Obama administration, whether it was the FBI or various members of the intelligence agency, using their position in order to either protect people or punish people to get a certain rise or a certain goal and objective. And what I will also follow up and say is that, you know, I'm tired of Congress, though, just sending letters and making threats. I think the American people, many of us want to see people go to jail for this. The fact is that what the Obama administration did, what some of these officials did, was grossly negligent and also responsible for the civil liberties of many Americans, to include now the sitting president of the United States, President Trump. His civil liberties being violated. So what I would say is that these people need to be held to account for what they did, and they did indeed break the law.
Congressman, we're going to move on to your Democrat colleagues and some of the antics they've pulled obstructing justice. They've spent months disrupting ICE operations. They've done publicity stunts. They've created a hostile and dangerous environment at these centers where they've gone and tried to get attention for themselves, I guess. Now House Democrats are suing the Trump administration. I guess they want more access to detention facilities.
Congressional oversight that we not only must do as part of the Constitution, but in this particular case, there's actually a specific law that allows us to do this oversight, which they're just not allowing us to do. So that's why we're going to court.
Yeah, sorry, we had a soundbite there we wanted you to hear. Of course, the Trump administration is allowing congressional members to visit facilities. That's so long as they schedule it in advance, not that hard. What do you think is, I mean, I think this is just them trying to make it hard for ICE to do their job, trying to maybe raise some money and campaigning. they're still trying to paint these violent criminals that are illegal immigrants as, Maryland dads.
You know, you are absolutely correct. First and foremost, they know that they can request meetings, that they can go to these facilities whenever they want. They just don't like the fact that this administration is one of the most transparent in American history, and they're trying to keep their voting base activated for the midterms. But the fact is that the Democrat Party platform and their messaging is at an all-time low. I just want to point out the fact that a majority of Border Patrol officers are actually Hispanic, yet the Democrats are using this narrative that ICE and Border Patrol are somehow racist for enforcing the law, and that's simply not the case.
All right, Congresswoman, I want to change the topic yet again to turn to your effort to force a vote on banning congressional stock trading this fall. One Congresswoman who saw this may impact Nancy Pelosi, and President Trump is very interested in learning more about her financial activities. Listen.
I like it conceptually, and Nancy Pelosi became rich by having inside information. She made a fortune with her husband, and I think that's disgraceful. What I do think is Nancy Pelosi should be investigated. She knows exactly what's going to happen, what's going to be announced. She buys stock, and then the stock goes up after the announcement's made, and she ought to be investigated.
Well, now, while Pelosi says she supports the legislation to flip-flop from her earlier position, her response to Trump's comments might suggest she's worried about this. Listen.
Nancy Pelosi became rich.
Why do you have to read that? We're here to talk about the 60th anniversary of Medicaid.
He accused you of insider trading. What's your response to that?
That's ridiculous. In fact, I very much support the stop the trading of members of Congress. Not that I think anybody's doing anything wrong if they are. The president has his own exposure, so he's always projecting.
All right, Congresswoman, are you going to investigate Pelosi's stock trading activities over the years? And are you confident you can get a stock trading ban passed? I'll just mention 2022. Everybody remembers Paul Pelosi bought $1 million worth of NVIDIA options and made a ton of dough on them. What do you say, Congresswoman?
I would say that she's probably not the only member of Congress that needs to be investigated, and that the insider trading that takes place in Washington, D.C. is happening on both sides. So I would love to help investigate that. But, I'm super happy that President Trump does support a banning on congressional stock trading, because the fact is that I've been getting a ton of pushback on this. And the fact is the American people, it's one of the biggest bipartisan. I think over 80% of Americans don't think that members of Congress should be doing this. And the fact is we're given access to very private information. We're working with industry leaders. We're going into security briefings. So yes, we are given the ability to basically impact the markets, and people are making a lot of money. It's not fair and it's not right. So during the swamp, we want to ban stock trading. I think that I'll get the signatures, and I think that that's why they're worried.
Amen.
Well, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, it's a Sunday night, it's a summer, it's August. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Thanks so much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.